This time it wasn't even close. Recep Tayyip Erdogan's famed mantra, whoever wins Istanbul wins Turkey, ringing very loud after the country's president forced a rerun of the March 31st municipal elections and lost. We'll break down the vote in the city where Erdogan served as mayor a quarter century ago and ask, is it a turning point for a nation that's seen more and more power concentrated in the hands of a single man? The win makes new mayor Ekram Imamoglu of the center-left CHP an instant factor in Turkish politics. But with Istanbul home to 1 in 5 Turkish voters, but does he have what it takes to unite the opposition beyond the city limits? And what happens in the 4 years before the next election cycle, in particular to rule of law? This Monday marks the opening of the trial of 16 prominent supporters of that other big challenge to Erdogan's rule these past years, the Gezi Park protests of 2013. They denied charges of trying to overthrow the government. Now, how will the country's leader of 16 years react to the latest setback he has on his hands? Today in the France 24 debate, we're wondering if it's a turning point for Turkey. And joining us, she was France 24's Istanbul correspondent from 2012 to 2018, Fatma Kizimoglu. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Also joining us, sociologist Denise Barachik. Barachik, I'm getting the pronunciation right. The author of Ask Them If They Like Us. Thanks for joining us. From Istanbul, commentator Onur Erim is with us as well. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And we're pleased to be joined by Craig Capitas, contributing editor to Quartz.
Bonsoir, mon capitaine.
How are you, sir?
Good.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. 54% of the vote for Imamoglu, 54%, and a lot of celebrating. Kathy Clifford has more.
On the streets of Istanbul, residents discuss their new mayor and his landslide result.
I didn't cast my vote last time because I believed that our votes were stolen, but I saw our people had awakened and I decided to wake up now too, so I cast my vote. My faith in this country has been restored.
I cast my vote in favor of the ruling party, but unfortunately it did not win. The other parties, the gangs, they won. I hope it'll bring good fortune, but I don't think it will.
The Turkish nation has always defended and supported victims. I believe it's because they couldn't explain why there was a cancellation that they lost this way, with this mass punishment.
Many analysts say the ruling party's decision to rerun the election over controversial fraud claims helped Ekram Imamoglu by turning him into a victim and giving him extra publicity. A little-known district mayor at the start of the year, he won the election by more than 777,000 votes, up from just 13,000 in the first election in March. On Sunday night, he addressed tens of thousands of supporters in Istanbul.
Sovereignty belongs categorically to the people. We will never forget this. We will work hard for Istanbul. I promise all of you.
President Recep Erdogan conceded defeat for his party's candidate, tweeting his congratulations. It's a blow for him that even some pro-government media have called a victory for democracy.
The last time back in March, the difference was 25,000 votes, and that difference has increased sizably, Fatma Kizilboa. When you break it down, turnout appears, we don't have the final numbers on this exactly, but we don't have the official result yet, but it appears to have been just very slightly down. Some people had worried that for this rerun, a lot fewer people would turn out and vote.
And this is not what happened, actually, because a lot of people went to vote this time. But if we try to understand what happened this time, I think that Turkish people, and more precisely, of course, people from Istanbul, stood against this feeling of injustice. Because on the first vote, during the 31st of March, they've been recounting the votes for more than 2 weeks, I think, and everyone was just fed up with that. They've been waiting for more than 2 weeks to have the results, and then finally Ekram Imamoglu became the mayor during 18 days, I think, something like this. And during these 18 days, he took some decisions that appeared to be very interesting for the people from Istanbul, such as he's been deciding some discounts concerning the transports, the water, ending financing some religious conferences, etc. So it was very interesting for people. He also promised that he will stop wasting money from the people and distribute it in a more fair way. And I think this is what happened yesterday. People decided to vote against this feeling of injustice.
So a mix of both. They thought that it was unjust to call a rerun, and they grew to like the guy. Onur Erim, do you agree?
Well, hello to all your viewers. Definitely a big congratulations to Imamoglu, to CHP, and to whomever was involved with his campaign. It was definitely a immense success last night, especially after the margin went from 13,000 to nearly, I guess, 800,000. Definitely hats off. I pretty much sum up 3 reasons for Binali Yıldırım's loss and Ekram İmamoğlu's margin at this time. Number one, it's obvious that there was a big reaction to the election board's decision, where both candidates, since the decision, has claimed that they were irregularly, in their favor or against them. Number two, we have to, still, underline the fact that Turkish economy is going through pretty much extreme hardship for the last year and a half. And the last but not least, certainly not least, again, it seems now, actually it seemed before, that given the circumstance, Imamoglu's image, what he represented during the campaign, has been a very, very good choice. And Imamoglu has outdone himself, especially with the implementation of post-truth politics, which he followed to the tune from day one, and probably did a better job than Trump did in his own presidential campaign.
What do you mean by post-truth politics in this case?
Pretty much he made about 19, if I'm not mistaken, claims between March 31st and yesterday. 17 of them were proven to be false, but nobody cared because there was such a feeling that Imamoglu and the campaign caught against Erdogan at this point, and they played it pretty well. As I said, the numbers out there, he made about 19 claims, 17 were falsified, and the 2 is up in the air. Nobody knows which way it will go, which is, again, a perfect implementation of post-truth politics. This is not to take away from his success. He did what he had to do, and he did it perfectly, definitely. My hat's off to him, his campaign, and CHP for the first time in a long time.
Denise Barczyk.
Hi. I'm a bit surprised. I'm so sorry, even though your English is perfect, but I didn't understand what the post-truth
that there were claims on the campaign trail that are fallacious, that are untrue.
I was just thinking that actually Imamoglu was so successful because he maintained a super organic, I called, campaign. It was super positive. Young people were in it. A trademark slogan was like, everything will be beautiful. It's really it was showing the hope of the young people, the people who wants to find in jobs. Actually, the economy is in recession, and we have a seriously real problem in the big cities. And Istanbul is the capital, kind of capital of the Turkey, economical capital. But and I think Imamoglu is a very sincere leader. In a way that he was showing his religion was because I asked before coming here to few people what they were thinking about Imamoglu, especially in the conservative neighborhoods, and they say we believe that his the way that he shows his religion, because there are some habitus, like we called in sociology, like in a Bourdieusian way, that he was sincere when he tells about his religion, when he shows it, when he faced, or when he was talking about Atatürk. We know that he was actually thinking and sharing the same ideas and values. So he was really successful to have these different point of views, values all together, and to give the hope to the young people.
Was it, do you think, a pro-Imamoglu vote or an anti-Erdogan vote that we saw?
It was, I think that you mean the difference which were coming?
Yeah.
Yeah. Many conservative people who were voting to Erdogan, I think they changed their minds because Turkish people loves oppressed figures in Turkey. When there is injustice, people like to support them. And it was the case when he learned the news. He was the first day of the Ramadan, which is a very important day. And it was injustice. We don't know why we re-elected. If there was some sort of, if they steal, how could you possibly tell us the difference between 30,000 to almost a billion, like a million, sorry.
Yeah. A 25,000 vote margin thereabouts in the March 31st vote. Greg Kapitas, are you surprised at the way things have unfolded?
I say spare a cheer for a return, however short-lived, to the Istanbul of old, when secularists and theologists could gather and make Istanbul one of the great cities of the world of culture, art, philosophy, science. However, the problem of Turkey is not in Istanbul. The problem is in Ankara, where you have a government that is a wonderful example of an unstable authoritarian state, essentially a confederacy of hobgoblins who have lumbered the country with $328 billion.
But this time they're conceding defeat.
Do you want to look at it short-term, Francois, or do you want to look at it long-term? Look, the buzz on the street is this new mayor could be the candidate to run against President Recep Tayep Erdogan in
2023.
Yeah, right. Okay? Let's not forget that President Erdogan has called this fellow a terrorist. There is still a fear on the streets of Istanbul that...
Excuse me, when and where did he call him a terrorist?
I could send you links to
You
the
could send me all you want, but you're talking about a Turkish president calling a candidate of CHP in Istanbul a terrorist,
Yeah,
which did not happen.
Well, it was reported in a number of Western newspapers. I doubt you would have seen it there because there's no freedom of press in Turkey. You have 68 journalists jailed, 122 received jail sentences in 2018. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, there's right now a minimum of 68 journalists behind bars. For the past 3 years, President Erdogan and his government have jailed more journalists than any other country in the world, according to Amnesty International, Reporters Sans Frontières, and the Committee to Protect Journalists. So whatever information you may be receiving in Turkey, I would suggest is not accurate.
All right, there is...
Sir, show me one international press that claims that president actually said that. You can't. Because that's just not true.
I did not bring the citation with me, but I would be happy.
I respect the program's continuation. I don't want to go on with this, but what you just said is not true. But go ahead.
Well, since Amnesty International describes Turkey as, quote, the world's largest prison for journalists, I think that does support the fact.
All right, we'll fact check that later.
Fact check that. Your point is correct.
Whether or not Recep Tayyip Erdogan called Imamoglu a terrorist, the point is that it was a gamble, right? Calling this rerun of this election.
Yeah, it was a gamble. It was a gamble. and Erdogan lost.
How could he not see it coming?
I have no idea. Actually, he does believe that his power is somewhat omnipotent. So I think a lot of it has to do, with his personality.
Sorry, can I?
Denise Barachik.
Yeah, I think there is an alienation with the grassroots of the AKP with the Erdogan, because Erdogan's success was coming, how the people were identified with their leader. But this time there was, I think, in a moment where there is an unemployment rate is rising and there is a recession, there is many economic problems, and there is a new image of Mr. Erdogan, who is in a way that he is richer, he is a bit
or to ask it differently, is it a question of the Turkey of the haves and have-nots is perhaps shifting, in the sense that what's interesting with these municipal elections is the big cities like Ankara and Istanbul voted for the opposition, but in smaller towns it was the AKP that swept the board.
That's his base. That's always been his base.
But I think also when you see the map again. I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
Go ahead.
When you see the map again, this is now where the CHP won the election. It's almost red in every part of in the conservative neighborhoods, everywhere. So it means there is belief and trust which are earned by Imamoglu that he will be give the justice to the people, like the waste. He also mentioned we will finish the waste in Istanbul. We will create a more liberal and democratic city, and this is how the cities are evaluated in 25 years. We are talking about the quarter of a century. This is so important. This is where the sociological change has been occurring for a long time, and now the people from the rural part, the immigrants, became the citizens of the big cities. So it's also changed everything. And
People are
also
moving to the
Kurdish
city.
people, it's so important. They have a super important role of the change of the votes. It's a new area of the Kurdish politics, I think. It's now they want to show. They also wanted to be have the respect and to be seen as an equal citizen, not to be stay on always calling them like the terrorists. I'm not saying we are calling or not, but they wanted to be equal and enjoy the democratic rights, and this is what is happening. And this is a huge success of Imamoglu, CHP, and the other parties who were coming all together.
The Kurdish-rooted HDP party, which decided not to stand and instead threw its support behind that opposition candidate. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the challenges that lie ahead. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're the day after the opposition won by a strong margin, 54% of the vote, a rerun of the Istanbul mayoral election, one that had been scrapped by authorities back in March. With us to talk about it, France 24's former Istanbul correspondent, Fatma Kezilboğa. We're also joined by a sociologist, Denise Barachik. From Istanbul, commentator Onur Erim is with us, and Craig Kapitas, contributing editor at Quartz. On the one hand, there are the celebrations this Monday for the opposition. On the other, the trial of 16 accused of trying to overthrow Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The group includes renowned businessman and philanthropist Osman Kavala, whose detention since November 2017 has made him a symbol of what critics say is a crackdown on civil society in Turkey. He's accused of orchestrating and financing the protests, which began over government plans to build over Gezi Park in the heart of Istanbul, one of the few green spaces left in the country's largest city. Fatma, we've had trials for that failed coup attempt back in 2016. Now suddenly, here we are revisiting Gezi Park, which is earlier.
Well, not suddenly, because these people have been judged now for few months. But what is interesting here, and some people are in jail for quite a long time now. What is interesting here is that about this Gezi case, when they're talking about basically it's like a coup attempt, we'll say. I've been there during the Gezi protest movement, and what I can tell you is that it was, I mean, from what I could see, and I think that it was the same for a lot of people, it was like a very spontaneous movement in the way that no one was expecting such a lot of people to take the streets and to occupy this place, this very famous place now in the middle of Istanbul, Taksim Square. So what I would like to say is that we have this case now, this Gezi trial that's just started. But if we just take in account the results in Istanbul, for example, I think that right now it's the time for the AKP and the government to take the lessons about these results. And this is probably what will happen, because very few months ago, I mean, Ekram Imamoglu was unknown from a lot of people in Turkey. He was just a mayor of a small district of Istanbul. And within 6 months, this man became like a major political figure confronting the most important man of the country, who is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And I think that this is something very interesting that we will have to look at, in the way that a lot of people are accusing the president, so Erdogan, to polarize the country. And just in front of him, there is like this man, Ekram Imamoglu, who is doing exactly the contrary. He is just trying to talk to everyone, and he's promising just to help people to make peace between each other. So this is very interesting. We'll see what will happen with this Gezi trial.
Yeah, at 49, Imamoglu thrust into the limelight. Let's take a look now with Yuka Royer.
Ekram Imamoglu seems to have come from nowhere to become a figurehead of the long-suffering Turkish opposition. The soft-spoken local politician shot to fame through his surprise win in Istanbul's mayoral election back in March and the subsequent annulment of that. A rerun which the CHP candidate portrayed as a test for Turkey's democracy.
This is not just a mayoral election for Istanbul. This is also the day to repair our democracy after a period of illegal process that's been inflicted on our nation.
Imamoglu's victory over the ruling party's candidate in March, with a margin of 13,000 votes, came as a major upset in President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's hometown. The president did not recognise it and instead called for a rerun, citing alleged irregularities. The setback actually helped boost Imamoglu's profile both at home and abroad. His Twitter following has soared from 350,000 to more than 2.5 million since the first vote. Even some among the ruling party's supporters were sympathetic to the opposition candidate.
He won that election and they stripped him of his victory. I'm a supporter of the AKP, but I will now vote for Imamoglu in protest.
Craig Kapitas, the new mayor of Istanbul, picking up on what Fatma said, we've been taught now that what works in politics is vitriol. Go for the jugular, try to bash the opposition. And here's this guy with a completely different approach.
He's the Mayor Pete of Turkey, you know. He's a pacifying candidate. It's a stunning victory for him. And I hope Fatima is right, that it creates a precedent here, you know, going forward. But, you have to look at the basics. The basics, President Erdogan controls the judiciary, he controls the economy, he controls the army, he controls the police. AK Party is still a very, very powerful organization. And I think, you know, like I said, let them celebrate for 48 hours, but there are some elemental economic problems, not only in Istanbul, but throughout the country. I mean, right now, the only country in worse economic straits other than Turkey is Argentina.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable...
In terms of?
In terms of debt, in terms of a growth in terms of their currency. And what's the shame of it is Turkey is a great country. It has a history as hardworking people, 80 million people, right, in the population, very intelligent classes of people throughout, sectors down there. And what you've seen over the past 4 years is huge capital flight and intellectual flight, leaving the country. And that's not good. So hopefully, the new Mayor Pete of Istanbul will bring a lot of those folks back home. But we have to wait and see.
Yeah, Onur Erim, it brings us back to the question that was posed by Fatma, which is, what do you do when you're the government and nobody outside of Turkey believes that those who organized the Gezi Park protests were trying to stage a coup?
You're referring back to Gezi Park, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. I really can't talk in a short period about Gezi Park, having lived through the incidents in both in Istanbul and Ankara, and have actually contributed heavily in a book about the Gezi Park. There's one thing that most Turks in Turkey do realize and do accept, that Gezi Park, especially after the first 4 or 5 days, it turned into something that nobody expected. And it's not anything peaceful. It has nothing to do with green. It has nothing to do with the governance. After the 4th or the 5th day, there were a number of terrorist groups that infiltrated into the arena, into the square, and things took a different turn. We have to.
I'm sorry, terrorist groups? What were their acts of terror? I didn't hear about this.
No, 7 people have died. More than 1,000 got injured. There was close to $1 billion in business damages within the week. Couple more billions afterwards. No. I said terrorist groups that infiltrated into the square to stir up the square. This is something that everybody agrees upon in Turkey. Well, maybe 99.9%. Now, what we disagree upon in Turkey is how we got there and why we got there. A number of people say, there's a good number of people say that, hey, the reason we got there is because of AK Party's ruling and people that didn't like how they ruled. That's how it started. But how it continued is a different story. So we may have a difference of opinion, but after the 4th or the 5th day, the Gezi Park incident was not a peaceful. It wasn't a peaceful demonstration. It wasn't a demonstration about governance. It wasn't a demonstration about green or anything that would actually have to do with public policy.
All right, let me ask. Let me ask Fatma here, because you covered those demonstrations.
I just would like to ask a question, if you let me do that. You're talking about some people who have been killed during this protest, and we know that most of these people were protesters. My question is, do you think that when you're talking about some people who infiltrated the movement, are you also maybe also pointing the Gülen movement, for example?
Partially, yes. But I'm also talking about DHKPC and PKK and others. Of course, FETÖ terrorists are a big part of Gezi movements.
All right.
So do you think that it
and
was...
I'm not saying that. The court findings are saying that.
Do you think that it was the Gülen movement infiltrated, and we know that also inside the police, who killed these people? Can we say that?
You need to ask that to the courts. I'm not the judging jury here. What I do know, what is actually underlined by the court's decision, is that there were a number of terrorist groups that actually infiltrated into the arena, whether under a police uniform or as a civilian, that stirred up the arena and turned this thing to something that it was not.
Onur, I'm really surprised here, because since the start of this show, we've bandied the word terrorist about a lot. And that's, again, it's where there's a bit of a disconnect here, because we really don't associate the Gezi Park protests with terrorism and the accusations of calling everyone a terrorist. It just seems as though it's just a little bit difficult.
May I say something? I'm sorry, but it was.
That's fine, but
I'm sorry,
first of all,
Eric.
your guest was the first one to use the word. Secondly, I'm talking about the
he was quoting Erdogan.
KPC and PKK.
I'm-
You're third. Listen, I warned you before. If you can put up something that right now that he said that, you could send to me later. Doesn't matter. But if a president of a country like Turkey calls somebody a terrorist, and if that person happens to be the Turkish CHP's Istanbul candidate, that would be all over the news. If not in Turkey, in Europe. So what you are doing right now is making a claim that has no grounds. But
I didn't make any claim, but Denise Barachek, go ahead.
Actually, it's nice to...
No, I'm talking about your guest. I'm
Right.
sorry. Just one second.
Denise Barachek, one at a time. Denise Barachek.
I think that was the real problem during the second time that we were going to the election. Everything goes so fast to the negative. When we are talking about something, it suddenly becomes with for the Gezi manifestation. It started with a very, again, organic environmental causes. Like it was a huge problem in Istanbul. And again, Istanbul has many problems about ecological problems because the urbanization went so wrong. We have now, this is one of the reasons why people wanted to see Imamoglu, because he gives some solutions.
So will he be able to deliver? That's the question.
Yes, of course.
He will?
He will,
Won't
of
it be
course.
dashed expectations?
I'm also not okay with you about the very negative portrait of Turkey. We are doing so well. We are defending our democratic rights. We are going to elections. We young people are very hopeful. Yes, okay, it was a very difficult period of time after the 2016 from the coup d'etat. People immigrated, very talented and young people. But now it is time to understand Turkey choose always the democracy, secular values. We want to be a part of the Europe, not some sort of the theories that we are coming the anti-democratic country. We have the hope. We, as the Imamoglu say, we have the youth, and I believe in Turkey because there is also a women's movement which is so important. I want to underline, which is started also before the Gezi movements. It didn't come out of nowhere. These movements, the protests. There is lots of pressure on the women's right in Turkey, and we stood up for that. Women are so successful for demanding their rights. And also Imamoglu is so successful to have a campaign with his wife hand in hand together to show the love. It was remaining in our country for a long time. And another say, I'm so sorry, it's like actually the country was looking for a candidate since 2015 after the 7th June of election, but it didn't go well because we didn't see a new leader. Now there is a hope in a new leader, which is created by the conditions. And I think Turkey is not an anti-democratic country. I have the hope, we have the youth, and everything.
But other parties put aside their own ambitions to rally behind Imamoglu. At the national level, it wouldn't be the same, would it? They would each field their own candidate.
Yes. But now it's another area.
All right. Let me just ask you, Honorarum, is it just the end of a cycle? Recep Tayyip Erdogan's now been either prime minister or president for 16 years. Is it just the end of a cycle now? Because the pendulum does have to swing back at one point. We've heard reports that the former president, Abdullah Gül, the former foreign minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, they're considering forming their own political party. Is the AKP run its course for now?
We'll just have to wait and see. You asked you made, I think, a comment or asked a question earlier, and I would have kind of agreed with you that this election seems to be not won by CHP but lost by AK Party. And the reason I say that is, first off, let's understand that this election, this local elections, AK Party with MHP got 52% of the votes, as opposed to the other sides, the other coalitions, 37%. AK Party by its own still got 44.5% of the votes, as opposed to 30% of CHP, which is more than 50% difference. The point I'm trying to make is it is still the number one party. It is still the winner of the 2019 elections. AK Party, how I put it out, is that AK Party has won the war, if we have to make an analogy. But at the same time, it lost many important battles, and in doing so, is injured some of his very important commanders, like Mr. Yildirim. Let's not forget, even in Istanbul, in Ankara, in Antalya, where AK Party lost the representativeship of the metropolitan municipality, AK Party still has an overwhelming majority in the city councils, in the borough mayorships of each metropolitan city. So is this a big warning, as some AK Party members call it, to Erdogan, to AK Party? Maybe. Can this fact, can this result take CHP, take Imamoglu to further steps? We will wait and see, but let's not forget, with everything said and done, Mr. Imamoglu got less votes in Istanbul than Mr. İnce, CHP's presidential candidate from last year, and Mr. Sarıgül from 2014 race when he was a CHP candidate. So, and now we both can't hear or see them in the political arena.
All right, let me ask.
Is there a good path? Go ahead.
Let me ask Fatma here. The fact that we're hearing word that there could be a new party formed, do you believe it? That will there be a breakaway party with former President Gül, with the former foreign minister?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so, because knowing Abdullah Gül, he doesn't have any courage, let's say, to do that. So, but what is interesting, just to complete what Onur said, the party, AK party, and Erdogan will probably have to learn their lessons, as I said before, from these elections. But also, let's not forget, and we all know that Recep Tayyip Erdogan is a very, very good political strategist. So let's not be too quick in taking some conclusions. Let's wait and see, I think.
So such as what? What can you expect? How do you expect Erdogan to rebound?
It's very difficult to expect, but I think I just say that Erdogan is a very, very good political strategist, and he's always surviving, so we'll see.
One of his cards, of course, is always foreign policy. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who takes on all comers when need be. We saw it last week when he was critical after the death of Egypt's former president Mohamed Morsi. And then there's NATO member Turkey's decision to buy S-400 missiles from Russia. Recep Tayyip Erdogan consistently shrugging off pressure from the United States to back out of that deal, like in these images back in April when he visited Moscow.
If we have already made an agreement and if we've signed all the documents, well, of course, we will move on with that. This is our sovereign right. This is our decision. No one can ask us to abandon it.
What do you make, first of all, of this decision to buy these S-400 missiles, Greg Kupitas?
Well, this is the brilliance of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He has two very big trump cards. He's a member of NATO. And that gives him a legitimacy in the West, a legitimacy that has been eroding over the past 5 years. The second trump card he has is he controls the floodgates of migrants coming from Syria and other countries into Europe, and he holds that over the EU. Those are his two big trump cards. I can tell you that the American government, the U.S. government, is very disturbed with President Erdogan's antics with the Russians, because he is supposed to.
You're calling them antics?
Antics. Well, they're more than antics. There are some people in the United States right now in Congress who are wondering if there's a way to expel Turkey from NATO, which would be a disaster for the Turkish people. The other thing you have to remember here, there's a third factor, and to this respect, on this one, I agree with President Erdogan to a great extent. He wants the United States to give him waivers on Iranian sanctions so that Turkey can buy oil and other petrochemical products from Iran. And he doesn't like the extraterritorial hand of the United States coming in to tell his government what to do. And I think he's right on that issue because Turkey could be a very effective broker through NATO with Iran and other countries in the region. But as far as the Western leaders, both in Washington, and I'm not talking about Trump people, I'm talking people on Foreign Relations Committee, various senators, and foreign policy, elected foreign policy officials I know in Europe, they are not satisfied with his ability to work in concert with the West, even though he's a NATO member. And the word they use over and over, not my word, belligerence. Uncontrolled belligerence. That is the phrase that is used over
All right, so
and over.
two questions, Fatma. First of all, how is Turkey impacted by this standoff that seems to be coming to a head between the U.S. and Iran?
What I just want to say is that I've participated to a NATO exercise in Turkey. It was 2 years ago, and I've been asking the question to Turkish soldiers, and what they answered to me, they say that withdrawing from NATO is almost impossible. It's very difficult. So they told me
it is. It's extremely difficult. Yeah, it's very hard.
That's not something that might happen very quickly. Let's say. So that's the first thing. The second point I also would like to make about this, we're just seeing that like an opposition between Turkey and the United States. But I think we also need to remind that there is Russia here, and Turkey, because of Syria, is dependent, if we can say, from Russia. So they have to, I mean, what they say, and today the Foreign Affairs Minister, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, said that again. He said that there was absolutely no way to cancel this deal made with Russia. And I think that would be very naive to think that has no link with Syria and with what Turkey is trying to do inside Syria, still knowing that Bashar al-Assad...
That all sounds very nice and very geopolitical, but what would happen if France right now, a NATO member, decided to go out and buy Russian anti-aircraft weapons? What would happen if the UK, what would happen if Germany? There would be an uproar, and there isn't one here. President Erdogan's foreign policy in this respect, as a NATO member, has been a failure for the alliance.
And that was my second question, which is how is this played domestically in Turkey?
Greece has S-300s for years. No, but nothing happened to Greece and two other NATO members.
Sorry.
Fatma, how is this playing domestically in Turkey?
Well, let's just remember that Turkey is a very nationalistic country. So if you tell people, and this is what the mainstream media controlled by pro-government groups are saying and telling people all day, it's like it's a matter of national survival and it's a matter of security. So I would say that most of the people probably are backing Erdogan on this, but also they are also wondering what might happen if Trump suddenly decide to take some sanctions. That's also the problem.
Well, that is a big problem.
Yeah.
And in that respect, President Erdogan is completely correct to fight those sanctions. You had the problem with Halkbank, where one Turkish citizen, I think, is still in jail. They still could be, the Turkish government and Halkbank, which is a state-owned bank, could still be fined billions of dollars. The fact is that the United States, not the UN, the United States has been handcuffing Turkey's ability to get itself out of the economic mess it is in. That is clear. And President Erdogan is correct on that. But if you want the U.S. as a friend, not as an enemy, and particularly if you're a NATO partner and you're buying new generation Russian weaponry, not old generation Russian weaponry as they did in Greece. That said, this deal with the Russians and I understand the reasons why. It's a shame that it had to go through. It's a shame that President Erdogan could not reach an agreement with the United States, regardless of Donald Trump being in the White House, to avoid this from happening.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Craig Kapitas, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Fatma Kizilboa, Denise Barakchik, and also with us Onu Erim from Istanbul. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.